Please join me for the responsive reading. This is the mission of Faithful Living.
To teach the fragile art of hospitality.
To revere both the critical mind and the generous heart.
To prove that diversity need not mean divisiveness.
To witness all.
That we must hold.
Good morning. My name is Judy Botts, and I'd like to welcome you all to Fountain Street Church, a liberal religious community for almost 150 years. My journey to Fountain Street began in 1972 when I moved out this way from southwestern New York State. Eventually, I found myself working in the Montessori program in Grand Rapids Public Schools, and along about the same time decided that maybe it was time to get my feet wet and try out some different churches here in this community. Eventually, I ended up teaching, as I said, in the Montessori program and began coming to Fountain Street. And lo and behold, here are all these Montessori folks at Fountain Street. So my profession and my spiritual journey were dovetailing beautifully. And that was what really, I think, kind of pushed me into making a commitment to Fountain Street Church. It felt so good to be able to follow my own spiritual path, just as children in Montessori are allowed to follow their own interests in school. And it was really refreshing that this church did not save souls. We grow them here. And it just all felt very right to be here. So a few years ago, 9 years ago, I guess to be exact, when I retired from teaching, it gave me time to become very involved at Fountain Street the way I wanted to. Not only was I able to free my mind and choose my own spiritual path and grow my soul. Jason, I have to stop a minute and thank you. I just did the early service, and I need to say, playing a tambourine to music is something I've always wanted to do. It was wonderful. But I could help do some things to change the world in my own way, and have, since becoming pretty active here, been the coordinator for the district, Purple District, and gotten involved with Family Promise, coordinating volunteers here. I have grown my soul tremendously in Nessima Casey's writing class, and I'm so excited that we're going to have Noah's Flood here next week. These children, I don't know if this has been said, but the children that are in this opera have had a very big part in creating their costumes. Fountain Street was originally built to have big events like this, and Benjamin Britten wanted Noah's Flood to be performed in a church. So that's feeding my soul, growing my soul. And I hope that all of you who can will take advantage of the fact that we are hosting this event and come. You won't be sorry. Thank you. And again, I just need to say how grateful I am for this church community. If it's your first time here, know that you belong here, and please come back. Thank you.
I'm delighted that we were able to respond to this invitation to join the service today to speak about Noah's Flood. First, my appreciation, Reverend, for your invitation to host this. What better place, consistent with Britten's own thought that this work of his, a liturgical drama, if you will, is better produced in a church than a theater. And the logic is very simple. As members of the congregation, with no orchestra pit and proscenium stage between your experience of worship and the performer's gift to you, you become a part of the drama itself. Now, that is also consistent with the history of this kind of event. It's fascinating to me to read about the history of liturgical drama, and particularly the mystery plays, which are known in literary circles by the names of the cities in which they were produced, York and Chester and places like that. Great cycles in which the townspeople themselves acted out the roles. Not professional actors, but guilds, and they traveled from place to place in the city on the feast days of the liturgical year on a great cart called a pageant, which is where we derive our modern word. And they turned to the great stories of the Bible, Adam and Eve, Abraham and Isaac, Noah's flood. Noah's flood became far and away the most popular of those and the most significant in many respects in terms of its theatricality. And so if you can imagine that the people convened and they came by the thousands to see these performances acted out, and it was quite an honor to be included in this. Benjamin Britten has a unique genius for the setting of language. He turned to the original texts of these, which date back, beginning, the first documentations in the 12th century, and he chose a somewhat more modern version in Middle English, and we will sing that using the original text, but we will be projecting translations into modern English for you. But it is the beauty of the biblical story that he has captured so completely. First, the overarching theme of almost all of Benjamin Britten's work is innocence against the perils of the real world. And it is for that reason that he wrote so extensively for young people, for children. And in this case, he's done something very unique. We are all familiar, of course, with the story of Noah building the ark and inviting the pairs of animals to come into the ark. And in that case, he specifically asks that these animals be children. And from the various introductions that you have already received, you know that we have about 100 children involved in this. They made their own costumes. I'm proud to say that we will have at least 3 pink flamingos. But so they are very excited about the role that they play. God's voice interrupts Noah in his daily activities and says, I am painfully wrought with mankind and his sinful ways, so therefore I'm going to cleanse the earth by sending a great flood and in effect start over. But I'm saving you and your family because of your righteousness. And here are the specifications of the ark. Get about the building of this, and he and his family do, and you see it unfold right before your very eyes. And then the children process in their animal costumes up these aisles, singing Kyrie eleison. They join the ark sets sail. There's a great storm, and at the end of the storm, when the ark lands, then Noah sends out the raven and the dove. The dove returns with an olive branch, which signifies that now the earth is dry, and God enters into a new covenant with man. He sends a rainbow. He sends the sun, stars, and moon so that the firmament is reestablished. And then he instructs Noah to lead the animals out of the ark, and he and his family go with the animal kingdom to replenish the earth. Captured in beautiful church music, the traditions of Anglican hymnody, and becomes the foundation of this. It is truly a community-based event. First, the use of your beautiful church, which is central to the activities in our great city, but also professional players from the Grand Rapids Symphony, the youth orchestra, of the Grand Rapids Symphony. All of these children representing many choral groups and public schools from around the area. And the participation of other organizations, Odyssey of the Mind, the African American youth community. It's really a community pageant, and I do hope that you'll take advantage of it. Again, my appreciation for your hosting this event for us, because this church will be filled with great music and expression of Benjamin Britten's great liturgical drama. Two professional singers have joined us, very esteemed professional singers, and they're going to sing for you. Not from Noah's Flood today, because that is not a traditional aria in the sense of having, an opera in the sense of having arias and duets and things like that. It is a through-composed theatrical piece. But we have Tracy Watson from Central Michigan University, very distinguished credentials at Chicago Lyric and throughout the houses of Germany. And then following her will be Stephen West from University of Michigan, voice faculty, and again, a very distinguished career in the major houses of the world at the Metropolitan Opera and La Scala and other places. So with that invitation to come join me here, and Robert Byron's longtime accompanist for Opera Grand Rapids, you'll hear two.
In case you don't know, Robert Lyle was concluding his career as the artistic director of the Opera Grand Rapids with this production. Am I correct?
That is true. That is true.
And so I want you to realize that this becomes the capstone of a more than 20-year career.
Years.
So it is an honor that we get to be part of that moment when we can pay homage to your long years of service. And so I wish us all to savor this moment and the future week with a special joy for your gifts to Grand Rapids. Thank you so much.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having us today. I just wanted to introduce the piece that I will be singing. It is called Must the Winter Come So Soon, and I'm sure all of us feel that way as soon as October hits. And this is an aria from the opera by Samuel Barber called Vanessa. And what is happening is this character, Erica, is alone in an isolated house where she's looking out the window and seeing the first snow of the year and ponders what is it going to be like to be stuck in the house for the rest of the winter. So, must the winter come so soon?
Oh abundant. I want to welcome now to the dais Cameron Blake. If it weren't enough that we are to have the great blessing of Noah's flood with us, the following week, Cameron, who serves another community in northern Kent County as a music minister, is just recently completed a CD of work describing his experience as a new father. And he brings with us this morning an introduction to an opportunity to join him February the 18th for his CD release concert here at Fountain Street, which will also benefit Safe Haven Ministries, dedicated to serving those experiencing domestic abuse in our community. He welcomes us with a song this morning, which I ask you to listen closely to the lyric. It is truly appropriate for this moment and this day.
Good morning. Thanks for welcoming me into your community. It's a blessing to be here. I'm going to play a song called Fragile Glory. I wrote this record every other evening from 9:30 p.m. to 1 a.m. over a course of a year because I had a newborn, and we don't have much time when we have a newborn. And this is the one song that my wife said, you can't stay up tonight to write, so I woke up early in the morning and wrote this one. This is called Fragile Glory, and it's about how we are, hallelujah, we're humans. And the line of the song is, we are human hallelujahs, orchestrating what we can't control. In the quiet solitude of morning, I feel the twilight break the night in half. Earthworms writhing just beneath the surface, and the beetle's on another beetle's back. Don't pretend you didn't hear me from the steeple, above the bell that children love to ring. Well, I'm in the corner watching the barista cleaning out the dishes in the sink. Tiny ballet slippers on the nightstand, tiptoeing from the curtain call. What is man that you are mindful of him when he's tearing down the mirror on the wall? Fragile glory swelling up a beating heart, bicycle headlights passing through the dark. The tightrope walker points his toe to start, and the old bag lady pulls a grocery cart. We're human hallelujahs, orchestrating what we can't control. Lovers breathing through the windows, drawing out their futures on the glass. Leftovers sitting on the table, Marvin Gaye records on the rack. Still remember when you brought home this piano, and when the neighbors ruined its veneer. This room was always filled with laughter for everyone who ever sat here. First recital punch bowls lined like steel drums, where everybody has a nervous twitch. And what is man that you are mindful of him when he's tying a balloon around your wrist? Fragile glories swelling up a beating heart, and bicycle headlights passing through the dark. The tightrope walker points his toe to start, and the old bag lady pulls a grocery cart. We're human
orchestrating what we can't control. We are human, hallelujahs, orchestrating what we can't control.
A little backstory for Mr. Cameron. We met some months ago through the agency of a mutual friend. Delana Jensen is a former teacher of yours. Am I remembering that, Cameron? So he was a violinist, and I think maybe when no one's watching, you might pick it up from time to time. Delana and her husband, David Lockington, are members of our community, and so once again, the threads interleave with one another. One of the realities that may not be evident from where you sit is that virtually everyone in this room has a story that touches someone else in this room. You may not know it yet, but only when you speak to one another do you slowly catch the threads, the fraying fabric of life lets you chase the line, the umbilical, the connection, every one of you. It is my effort every week to touch upon one or two of those stories, if not directly, but by plucking them like a string of a guitar, so that we might hear the music that is always present in the world, but sometimes buried under the work and the chores and the obligations, the doubts and fears and the efforts. It is to unstop our ears that we are here. To begin my thoughts today, some words from other words. It's always good to start with the best words because you'll remember those and the lesser words of mine will vanish more quickly. The better words in this case come from the book of Exodus, which portion was read in synagogues yesterday. It's the part with the 10 Commandments in it, which, by the way, in case you haven't looked, they tend to happen 2 or 3 times. But in this case, in Exodus 19, I'm not going to read that portion, but the run-up to it. God is talking to Moses in Exodus 19 and says, "Go to the people and warn them to stay pure today and tomorrow. Let them wash their clothes. Let them be ready for a third day. For on the third day I will come down in the sight of all the people on Mount Sinai. You shall set bounds for the people round about, saying, 'Beware of going up the mountain or touching the border of it. Whoever touches the mountain shall be put to death. No hand shall touch him, but he will be either stoned or shot. Beast or man, he shall not live. When the ram's horn sounds a long blast, then you may go up on the mountain.' Moses then came down from the mountain with these instructions to the people and warned them to stay pure. And they washed their clothes. And then Moses said to the people, 'Be ready for a third day and do not go near a woman.'" Really? That's what it says. Oscar Wilde, no fan of orthodoxy himself, observed that everything in the world is about sex except sex. Sex is about power. Gilbert Keith Chesterton, marvelous poet of the 19th century, early 20th, wrote, "The first 2 facts which a healthy boy or girl feels about sex are these. First, that it is beautiful, and then that it is dangerous." Audre Lorde, a great poet in our own century. We tend to think of the erotic as an easy, tantalizing sexual arousal. I speak of the erotic as the deepest life force, a force which moves us toward living in a fundamental way. And finally, one wise statement by the actress Tracy Ullman As I get older, I just prefer to knit. Well, if you know the title of what I'm going to say, I will assuage you right now. I'm not going to say George Carlin's famous 7 words you can't say on television, because they can't be said in church either, at least not without causing a very deep ruckus. For those who may not be aware, George Carlin was famous, made his fame on a bit he called the 7 words you can't say on television. They are the vulgarities. It's a really wonderful skit that he does. I encourage you all to go home and look on YouTube and enjoy it. It is still hysterical, and it still has much to say about our culture. I had that phrase in mind years ago when, as a clergyman serving a Unitarian Universalist church, I created a sermon called The 7 Words You Can't Say in Unitarian Universalist Churches. I can tell you those: cross, Christ, salvation, damnation, communion, penance, and sin. They are almost as rare at Fountain Street Church, but we are not quite as allergic as long as you use them carefully and gently. Some other time I will ponder the power of words themselves, and it is formidable. But this morning I really am going to be talking about sex, which is what George Carlin's famous words were all about, which is why we don't say them, because they're all about sex. And it's kind of discomforting to talk about sex in public, and it's even worse to talk about sex in church. They seem to be about as opposite as one can get. Because after all, religion is about being moral and pure and not touching the mountain and things, and sex is what obviously makes us need to be moral and pure, is it not? The only reason to talk about sex in church is to say one word: don't. That's our reputation, isn't it, as religious people? Of course, this is Fountain Street Church. For half a century, we have been teaching sexuality to our youth as part of our general Sunday school education curriculum. You see, when people say they told you we're not a real church, they were right. And we're okay with that. We are not alone, though. Our Unitarian Universalist cousins, like me, my United Church of Christ comrades, who are both Jason and Elizabeth, are joint creators of a church-based sexuality program called Our Whole Lives. And it's not just for middle schoolers and high schoolers, it's for everyone from kindergarten up to adults. You thought you knew everything, didn't you? We are teaching it right now. It's a lot more fun over there than it is right here. And our friends at All Souls are doing the same thing at their church right now. Far from opposite, sex and religion are really bedfellows, because they are both about power, as Oscar Wilde observed. One is about the mystery of life. Sex is inevitably about how life happens, and religion is all about the mystery of death, what it means when it ends. These are primal facts. My late colleague, the great clergyman and preacher of Forest Church, said, religion comes from the twin mysteries of being alive and having to die. Now, you would think that religion would celebrate, sanctify, and find spiritual depth and meaning in sex. You would think we would do that as a species, but no, you know that's not what happened. Religion treats sex as an adversary. From the ancient Hindu laws of Manu, which are so old no one knows where they came from, to the 19th century Book of Mormon, religion has devoted immense efforts to controlling sex, containing it, confining it, emphasizing how bad it is for your soul. Now, I did say the Book of Mormon for a purpose, because we all know that back in the 19th century they were famous for their plural marriages. To the outsiders of the time, that reeked of what was called free love, which is a euphemism for you don't need to play by the rules. But in reality, in Mormonism, or Latter-day Saint religion, their plural marriage was extremely puritanical, which I know sounds odd. But that reflected their profoundly patriarchal beliefs about keeping women in their place, which was beneath men. You could say that early Mormonism was scary not because it violated marital laws from the Bible, but because it actually practiced them. Which brings me to the Bible, of course, which is full of things about sex. The Torah is the part where you find most of the rules reflecting a very ancient culture. Some people today regard these rules as so valid they must be universal for now and then and everyone else. Christians and Muslims and even some Jews will tell you the vast majority of most of those rules really don't quite need to be taken literally, but they need to be taken literally if you're gay. That's the most obvious example. We find reasons to skirt some of the other ones, but if you're gay, you'd better play by the literal rules. In fact, a local play produced here in Grand Rapids and in Kalamazoo, 7 passages, is named for the 7 biblical fragments that are used to whack gay and lesbian people over the head. They're called clobber passages, forgetting that the same book also tells you that you should not be able to marry people that you are legally able to marry now. The incest laws in ancient Israel were far more restrictive than they are now. Franklin and Eleanor would have not been allowed to marry in the Bible. Torah condemns other things, not just homosexuality, but it also condemns having sex with a legally married spouse, that is, if you're male and female, while the woman is in the middle of her menses, and for a week at least thereafter. That's just as bad as gay sex, by the way. And I don't see anybody hollering about that in any pulpits. Those are just a few examples. Oh, by the way, homosexuality is only wrong for men. For women, it's perfectly okay. At least in the Bible. Those are just 3 convenient examples of how we forget some rules and remember some others. Rules, scores of rules, all about keeping your sex life within bounds. You see, religion regards sex the way capitalism regards communism, as the nemesis. Controlling sex is essential because, if you don't, what would happen? Chaos. The struggle between sex and religion at bottom is the struggle between chaos and order. When our conservative Christian cousins rise up against same-sex marriage, it is from that sense that if you open that door, like Pandora's box, all the chaos in the world will come tumbling out. How often have you heard, if you let 2 men get married, why not 6 people? Why not adults and children? Why not animals and humans? Chaos would reign. Behind the moral outrage is a much deeper, terrible fear that the order of the planet itself would dissolve and the world would fall apart. Why is that? I'm not sure, but if we go back to the very beginning of Genesis, we can read how earth was, quote, without form and void. It was a mess. It was chaotic. The Hebrew was tohu vabohu, sounds desolate and dreadful. Then God puts things in order. You put the sun over there, the water over there, the land over there, the animals over here, the plants over here, and the people right there. And their job was to keep everything in order, keep the garden and till it. A place for everything and everything in its place. That's what laws do. They tell you which side of the road to drive on. They tell you how to fill out your tax forms. They tell you how to go to school. And we chafe at them, but we know in the end that a world without law would be chaotic. How sex became the thing we are most anxious about is so complicated I don't understand and therefore will not preach about. It is clearly, though, the force that creates life. We all know that. And yet it came to be feared as something that could destroy as much as it could create. Last week I talked about the movement called feminist theology, the urgency of women speaking about the patriarchal basis of modern religion. And it's true, it's genuine. It's hard to deny that male supremacy is assumed and enforced by every world religion. You don't have to look far to get that. Why? Because men need to control women, because women are the source of chaos. Because they are the begetters of life. It's also hard not to conclude that men in some basic way, and I speak now as a male, are deeply envious and terrified by women's power to create life. They can, we can't. It's unfair. And it's scary. At some preconscious level, we men are in absolute awe of that power, fascinated and terrified. Last week, I used a bizarre word in illustrating my own life. In the world of religious studies, German scholarship coined a term back in the early 20th century about the scientific study of religion, Religionswissenschaft. I love German. They can just stack up the letters forever, can't they? It all really makes great sense when you know German, but if you don't, it sounds bizarre. It means the science of religion. And one of its exponents was a fellow named Rudolf Otto, who in studying the religions of the world noticed that every religion had a similar experience of encountering the divine. No matter where it was and when it was or what it was, people who met something uncanny were both terrified and fascinated. He coined the term the mysterium tremendum et fascinans, the terrifying and riveting mystery of the holy. Now, anyone who's been present at a childbirth has had a taste of that feeling. I remember to this day with vivid clarity the birth of my eldest son. And I remember remarking to our physician that it seemed impossible that a human body could do what it was doing to bring a life into the world. And the physician said, I've been watching it for years, and I still don't understand it. And she was a physician and a woman. Life is a mystery. It's an irreducible mystery at some level, and it's hard to have the nerve to admit that we don't understand a bloody thing. Birth and death are the moments when we can no longer deny that mystery, when our control or our sense of control is completely useless, when the mystery is present and real and unavoidable, when we are terrified and fascinated. Now let's go back to that phrase, religion is our response to being alive and having to die. I don't think Forrest is right. I don't think religion is the response to that. I don't even think spirituality is the response, because those are the warm, contemplative feelings we get in church. The feeling I'm talking about is when you realize that you are compassed about by powers so great you cannot possibly understand them. Unless church is making you really quite frightened, that is not present here. What I am talking about is an experience we have all had at some point in the delivery room, at the deathbed, faced with enormities of life and death, when we realized something momentous was at hand that pushed everything else to the background, something so vast and deep and wide and true that it cannot be named, much less controlled. That's what's behind sex. In the Torah passage, God tells Israel to meet them at Sinai, and the mountain is covered in clouds, shot with lightning back and forth, and the thunder cracks and the earth shakes, and God warns the people that if they got too close, they would die. Behind the power of life and death is the power itself that is both life and death. Something so great you have to cordon it off like a nuclear reactor. If you even come close, you have to purify yourself lest you be drawn up in the whirlwind. Sex is the human thing we have that contains a piece of the mysterium tremendum et fascinans, the primal power of life. In a sense, that is the image of God, the power to create life. No wonder religion wants to control it. What if you went off making children all on your own without permission? You'd be violating everything. You would be tohu wa bohu everywhere. Chaos unleashed. Sex has to be contained, sequestered, cordoned off, put under a veil, out of sight, and not to be mentioned. And so begins 1,000 generations of repression. But out of sight is not out of mind, as anyone who has read Harry Potter understands. The villain, Voldemort, is often called he who must not be named. And of course, when you have something that must not be named, it makes it even worse than it really is, doesn't it? And so those forbidden words on television, those forbidden words in church become even more powerful because we can't say them. As hard as it is to speak of sex in church, the silence is vastly worse. The horror so many people feel about homosexuality, the vitriol with which they speak about abortion is contained in that silence. The violence done to women for millennia is in that silence. The murder of gay men and lesbian women and transgender folk, all the way from the fables of Sodom to Detroit in 2014, honor killings, genital mutilations are all in that silence of the church that will not speak about sex except to say, don't do it. How many more must suffer? I don't know. But I do know it depends on how long the church, religion, and we remain silent. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be found true in thy sight, thou who art my rock and my redeemer.